We're talking right now to Mike Miller, the head basketball coach at Hononegah. And several years ago, he was the head basketball coach at Guilford High School as a young man and had some outstanding basketball teams at Guilford. And, Coach, one of those players you had to play against was from Boylan, a guy named Lee Lampley. And since I moved here to Rockford, I hear his name's brought up. How did you see Lee Lampley as a player, as an opposing coach?
Well, I think Lee Lampley is arguably the best talent to ever come out of Rockford. There's been some great players, but you can go back to Ernie Kent and Dale Greenlee and Ryan Hoover and a lot of different guys from 25 or more years ago. But Lee Lampley's got to be in the conversation as one of the all-time greatest. He was a guy that you could put your best defender on him. And if he held him to 30 points, you thought he did a great job. It was a situation where Lee, back in an era when three-point shooting was just kind of coming into play, he had unlimited range. Nowadays it's more, it's not uncommon to see a guy shoot it deep from three. Lampley was doing it 20-some years ago, and he just had a range and a skill level that was really just impossible to stop. He could drive past you. He had incredibly long arms, so he could shoot over the top of you. He kind of had a deep, funky release on his jumper that was hard to block, and so he could always get it off against guys that were 6'5", 6'6". He could still get his shot off, and he was just a tremendous player.
And when they were at Boylan, they made a run kind of like you did at Guilford, like a year or so later, that kind of resembled what you guys did, didn't it?
Yeah, they got fourth in the state. I think his sophomore year. That was the year that he got in trouble and couldn't play in the state tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the team that had Johnny Hernandez, who was a really good point guard, and Michael Slaughter, who was a 6'7" post player. That both played at Eastern Illinois and had really good careers. Personally, I think that was one of the better, if not best, Rockford teams. Obviously my Guilford team in '93, the year later, got second in the state. But that Boylan team was fantastic that year, and Lampley was a sophomore. That team was an incredible talent. They had 4 or 5 awesome players that and Lampley was only a sophomore on that team.
When you look at it, that game that they played against King, they played them over at Boylan. They had the 2 big guys that ended up in the NBA, I think. How big was that making the legend of Lee Lampley as a basketball player, that contest?
Well, I think obviously, that put him on the map statewide, and it was a situation that, we're just far enough outside of the major market of Chicago that, people in Chicago think we're a long way out, and, they think we're downstate. And so for someone to really kind of break out on a Chicago media stage, you really have to do something special. And, obviously that qualified.
Did you ever do anything really special against him that you didn't normally do against people? Because I know you're a zone man ever since you've been at Hononegah.
Well, I never had been zone before until we went to, until I got to Hononegah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coaching a little bit different type of kid now in Hononegah than I was coaching at some of the places that I've been at before. So we were always, probably 85-90% man at Guilford. But it was a situation that you always had this special game plan for him, whether it be box and one, whether it be, just no help on Lampley. It was a situation where if you didn't make special arrangements for him, he was going to make you pay.
It's fun to think about players. When you hear a guy about Lee Lampley that plays that well, people still talk about him all these days. Have you seen anybody recently that you would think that would be in that category? Somebody you say that you thought was as good as player or at that level as Lee Lampley?
Well, Lampley, he was at a different level. And I think some of us old guys, our memories become fonder. You guys get, the kids today are great. Obviously, what Fred VanVleet's been able to do in high school and in college, is something that is an incredible accomplishment. to be an All-American,
Yeah.
and lead your team to the Final Four. I mean, that's stuff that people dream about, So Lampley is a totally different type of player than Lampley was. Lampley was a pure scorer, where Fred, I think, is the consummate point guard, where he's the coach on the floor and makes everybody better. Lampley was, I'm going to go out and get 40 every night if you don't watch it.
And when you look at it, how would Lee Lampley do nowadays in basketball? Let's say if he was on your Hononegah team, how would that work out for you over there?
We would immediately be challenging for state recognition.
Uh-huh.
That's the thing with basketball is one player makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you add Lee Lampley on any team, they become an instant contender. I don't care if it's one of the bottom teams of the conference or the best team. He's a difference maker.
How was he defensively? I know we talk a lot about his scoring, because I think he put over 2,000 points on the board at Boylan.
He was he was a typical high school kid who cared probably more about his offense than his defense. But he was a guy. He's only about 6'1",
mm-hmm.
but his wingspan had to be 6'4" or 5", and he just had really long length and he had really fast hands. So it was a situation where if he wanted to, he could cause fits for your offense when he wanted to turn it up. There's no doubt that he could have been something great. He led the nation in scoring at junior college. And obviously he had some off court issues and there were some troubles, in his life. But it was a situation that at junior college he had Kentucky and Florida State and all that stuff. I know his junior college coach, and his junior college coach told me that when Florida State recruited him, they told him they thought Lee Lampley was way better than Sam Cassell.
Oh, wow.
Sam Cassell obviously had, a long and productive NBA career. So we're talking that kind of talent.
And I think sometimes we get lost in all this is the fact that there are issues outside of basketball that sometimes can derail a kid's future and stuff like that. And sometimes it's just good to run that past kids nowadays, let them know that there's more to life than just basketball, too.
Well, our future is always not guaranteed for any of us,
Yeah.
and the choices you make obviously can impact you either positively or negatively, and I think obviously if he could do things over, I think he'd probably do some things differently, like probably most of us would. But
yeah.
As far as his talent, you got to put him up with the all-time greats, no doubt.
Before I let you go, did you enjoy watching him on the sideline, or was it just kind of like, oh man, can we get this over with?
Well, he was always, he had swagger before swagger was invented. He was a guy that would score on you, and not only let the kid that was guarding him know about it, he'd let you as a coach know about it too. I know one time he hit a fall away 30-footer over the top of our 6'5" guy, and he ran by the bench and told me that I better get somebody out here who can guard him because it was going to be a long night. And, unfortunately, he was right.
That was the worst part, wasn't it, Coach? He was right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had a lot of ideas to stop him, but doing them all was harder. It was easier said than done. Those ideas look better on paper.
Thanks so much, Coach. I love this history stuff, and this is really good, and I appreciate you taking the time, and always enjoy coming to Hononegah and watching a Coach Mike Miller team.
All right, well, thanks a lot.
We've been talking to Coach Mike Miller, the coach at Hononegah. We talked about Lee Lampley today. For the StatelineSportsHub.com, I'm Dave Schmidt.